Well, I had prepared a speech or a discourse for this presentation, but over the last 2 days, I've changed pretty much all of it. Yes, I think the human being is the only constant in our industry in the future. The presentation I'm going to give you today, I'm looking for the beep. Here it is. The presentation I'm going to give you today is a little bit different in the fact that rather than just give you facts, details, and data, I really want you to think. And the first thing I want you to think about is what it was that inspired you to join this fantastic industry. And I've heard it quite a lot. You know, I joined the aviation industry in the late 80s. As a young boy, I used to cycle to Gatwick Airport, 15 kilometers to watch the DC-10s, the 727s, 737s, the classic 747s. And what inspired me was the noise, and that's gone. What I want to do today is shift our focus a bit into the future and the human element of our industry. Because I think it's something that we've taken for granted. If we are relying on the golden era of aviation to inspire the next generation of aviation professionals, I think that we're setting ourselves up for failure. What I want to do is set the scene, and it's a rather stark scene of demographic trends. And they look a bit like that. It's generally agreed that for a society to remain economically viable, we need to have a fertility rate of 2.2. In Europe today, well, in fact, in Europe, we passed that figure a long time ago. And today we're actually at 1.67. And the forecast for Europe alone is 1.63 for 2050. Now, this is a global problem, and in fact, just yesterday morning in the newspaper, I read that China this year has closed 41,000 nursery schools because in 2023, their fertility rate for the first time dropped below 1. So this is a huge problem, except for one continent, and that's Africa. And it's predicted in Africa, by 2100, 54% of newborns on the entire planet will be born into sub-Saharan Africa. And yeah, that's potential. However, when you consider that half of those born on that continent will be born into poverty and conflict, the challenges are immense. The real question then is, what do all these figures mean? What does 1.67, 1.43 mean? And this, for me, is the real shocker. It means that in Europe, in 2050, the workforce available to us, and it's not just aviation, but to the whole of the European industries, is 17% smaller than it is today. And to give you a figure, that's 82 million people less for our industry and all the other industries to get the future workforce. So things like AI are going to be essential. And this looming scarcity is going to create fierce competition as we move forward. Now, as an industry, we've been aware of this problem now. Well, 2009, 15 years ago, ICAO launched their NGAP program. And this was a proactive response to this looming dilemma. That initiative actually gained dust for quite a while and was actually revived in 2018. More interestingly, in 2013, the European Commission launched or published its working document, and it was called Growth Potential of the EU Human Resource and Policy Implications for Future Economic Growth. Yes, it highlighted the diminishing workforce, but for me it also highlighted something really crucial, and particularly when we think about safety. And that is, by the end of that decade, so by 2020, for the European Union to achieve a 1% growth rate, human capital productivity would have to double. Now think of that in the context of our industry. Whereas in industry, we're actually predicting a growth of closer to 4%. Almost inevitably, we're going to see fatigue, and not just in aviation, but everywhere. We're going to see fatigue. We're going to see exhaustion and the creeping in of mental health challenges. And these challenges are all factors when it comes to human error. And one thing we're seeing a lot of increasing at the moment is human error. So in fact, in 2013, we were already warned this was going to come. So what are the solutions? Well, the first solution that the EC came up with was migration. But then when we think back to the beginning, I mentioned that this is a global issue. So migration might not be that simple. Simply shifting workforce across borders is only moving the problem from one country to another. It's not resolving the problem. And I think today's current political tendencies are not going to make the shifting of personnel any easier. Another proposed solution, and we've heard a lot about it today, is the rapid introduction of AI and automation. But I urge caution here. There's a model called the Gartner hype cycle. And what it suggests and what it's telling us is that when new technologies arrive, there's always huge hype, huge excitement. Wow, this is going to save us. And then there's a phase of delusionment when people think, oh, God, in fact, wasn't that good? And then there's a very, very gradual application of this new technology, and it has a tendency to actually achieve 2/3 of what we expected it to do. So this then leads us to what is the core of today's discussion, and that is the next generation. Now, whether we call them Gen Z, Gen Z, Gen A, and Gen A is, in general, those that are born after 2010, what I like to call them is young adults. And these are the people we really need to try and inspire. The problem is, I don't think we really know them. I don't think we've taken the time to step back, look at their outlook, and look at their perspective of their futures. Now, in the same way that as the pilots here and most of us here, we've had to learn how the systems we use work, what they do, how they interact with other systems, and what the consequences are of a failure. So in that vein, I stuck to studying neuroscience just to try and understand what it is, or what perspective the youth have on their futures. And I particularly concentrated on the prefrontal cortex. That's our decision-making machine. I must be honest, it's not my only motivation. In fact, I'm a father to 2 teenage daughters, and quite honestly, half the time I have no idea what they're going about either. But that's beside the point. Who we are today, who Generation Z and Alpha are tomorrow, evolves through genetics, but more critically, evolves through their experiences. And these experiences they use to build up their internal database, which they use to build frameworks, how they can identify opportunity, threat, assess risk, and ultimately make decisions. Now, interestingly, our brains, they absorb approximately 11 million bits of information every second. That's a staggering number. However, it can only process 45 of those bits of information. And that's a huge limitation because in today's daunting, hyper-connected VUCA, and Yannick mentioned it yesterday, that's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous society, the next generation then contends with what we call the 4 pillars of too much. 1, it's too much information. 2, too much choice or too many choices. 3, too much stuff or material excess. And 4, okay, it's not a too much, but all of that is coming too fast. understanding and addressing those is going to be crucial, critical for us to connect with the next generation if we are going to inspire them to join our industry. And these pillars have fueled what's called commonly now the comparison culture. And it's a pervasive mindset that young individuals particularly compare themselves to their peers and other people around them. And it's this relentless comparison that has profound implications on their future career choices. And this comparison culture can lead to unrealistic expectations, it can lead to fear of failure, and a loss of focus on their individuals or their unique passions. Paradoxically, the abundance of choices in this VUCA world form, whether it's from career paths, choices of industries, choices of what specializations I want to do in these industries, they can be equally detrimental. And there's also another overwhelming thing that happens now, it's called FOMO, and that's fear of missing out. And as a result of this, and a result of paradox of choice, the youth today become dissatisfied very, very quickly because they are scared the choice they made was the wrong choice. Now back to us as an industry. How are we doing? Are we merely surviving, or are we thriving and inspiring the next generation? Well, I think while we're doing quite well on the attraction front, there are a couple of areas I think we could do a lot better. And one of those, for me, which is the biggest, is the expectation-reality gap. Young people today, they are, especially entering our workforce, they are constantly exposed to polished, curated images of careers in aviation, and quite rightly too. And whether it's through social media or whether it's through advertising campaigns. But as an industry, we need to close the gap between what they're expecting from us and what we actually provide. And transparency is going to be key, and it's not easy, it's going to be hard work. But we need to be upfront about what the challenges and the rewards of a career in aviation actually are. It's equally important that we inspire to retain as well. There's no point attracting them into the industry, job done, but we can't inspire them to stay. We need them to stay for the long run because there's 82 million less of them. So this means investing in their growth, it means creating opportunity for them, and it means that we need to make them feel valued and we need to empower them. And this isn't an easy industry to do that in, but if we're going to compete with other industries, we have to find a way of doing this. And if we don't close this gap between what we promise and what we actually deliver, we will lose them. And the next thing I think we need to focus on, and I don't think we're doing that well either, is trust. And we've mentioned a few times today delays, cancelled flights, cancelled holidays. And I think every time that we have delayed flights or major cancellations, it's in the press, it's on social media. These are the same platforms that we are using to try and attract them. So make no mistake, they are seeing what's happening, and they are using this news to make their judgments and make their decisions on career choices. And if they see an industry where people are blaming each other, whether it's airlines blaming airports or airports blaming weather or governments blaming regulators, that doesn't instill trust. And that doesn't make it any easier for us to inspire them to join this industry. So rebuilding trust actually means that we need to stop deflecting responsibility in the public domain, and instead we need to take collective ownership collaboration, and face these challenges together as an industry, as an ecosystem. We must view aviation as an industry that is interconnected. Airports, airlines, manufacturers, regulators, we are all interdependent. And for that ecosystem to work, aviation ecosystem, there has to be equilibrium and there has to be harmony. Unilateral growth in any one of those sectors, whether it's an airport, whether it's an airline that's growing and then complains that ATC isn't following, that's not going to work. That's a systemic failure. And the next generation will see this systemic failure, and it isn't going to help us inspire them. Lastly, I think we have to consider the psychological effects that we have on this young generation. Our children, when they see, or when they're sitting in the airport and their flight has been cancelled at the last minute, they see their parents stressed, angry, trying to communicate with somebody, say, where am I going to sleep tonight? Am I sleeping on the airport floor? That leaves a psychological imprint on that next generation. Same generation who see their parents come back from running an AI optimized, let's say, roster or focused roster or schedule. And those parents aren't engaging their children during their 3 or 4 days off as they try to recover from fatigue and exhaustion. That leaves a psychological imprint on that child, which will affect his career choice later on. So we need to prioritize, if we prioritize individual optimization over collective well-being of our industry, we risk alienating the very people we need and we're trying to inspire. So it's time to shift our focus from individual optimization to systemic health. Now, this will not only attract the next generation, but it also provide a positive passenger experience, and that can't do the industry any harm. So let's wrap this up. I've got 1 minute left, and I know I'm standing between you and lunch. The future of aviation hinges on our ability to attract that human resource, and we need to inspire them for the long run. We need to move our industry beyond just survival, which is surviving next year. We need to embrace the future, and we must make this industry more human-centric. And let's not be remembered as the generation that squandered the potential of this fantastic aviation industry because we neglected the human resource and we took it for granted. Thank you very much. Bon appétit.